welcome to another Terrible Boat Chat. This week I've got an esteemed collection of RS800 sailors with me, and as way of introduction I'd like to ask them a couple of brief questions. First of all, their first RS800 nationals and the finishing position, and secondly their proudest RS800 result. So you guys who've listened before might be familiar with the first two people I've got on who've been on the chats before. So first of all, I'd like to open those questions up to Rob Gullen, because this is quite a simple answer. So your first RS800 Nationals finishing position and year?
So I've only done one. I did Eastbourne last year, and third was my position.
Perfect. And would you say that was your proudest RS800 result?
Yes, I guess it's an overall event, yeah. Actually, my proudest moment in that event was finishing the race on the really windy day when I had one spreader bent in half and the mast hanging by a thread on a single shroud, a snap tiller extension. I managed to pretty much drift through the finish.
Well, that's certainly more than some of us can say. Right, next. To open that question up to, I'm just doing this, you've probably heard from him before on this chat, but just for completeness, Tom Partington, your first RS800 Nationals and finishing position?
I think it was 2012, and I am not entirely sure on my finishing position. I'm pretty sure it was 23rd.
Ahead of
Hailing Nationals.
Similar to me or ahead of me, I think.
I think I was a couple of places ahead of you.
Oh, nice. Stick it in. Okay, and then additionally this week we have some RS800 class legends with us. So first of all, I'd like to ask Andy Jefferies, can you tell us your first RS800 Nationals and can you remember the finishing position?
Well, it was a long time ago, so I did have to go and have a look on the class history. But it was actually 2004 at Mayflower, Plymouth, and I finished 13th.
Wow! So for everyone listening, that gives you a pretty good insight as why Andy's on this on this call. Why we got him along?
If you hang around long enough, you get asked to do anything.
And what would you say is your proudest RS800 result? What are you?
Well, that was interesting. I looked through. To be honest with you, we're not very good at nationals. If I'm honest with you, I looked through in 2006 we were fifth, and 2016 we were also fifth. I think the competition's a bit too harsh for us at nationals, and we seem to perform a bit better when the sun's out when we go away. So I looked at it and I thought, well, we won the Euro Cup twice. We won it both times in France. First in La Rochelle in 2005, and then again in 2011. Which we were pretty stoked about. But actually, really, if I'm honest with you, actually last year finishing second to Tom and Francis in Garda was probably our proudest moment, mainly because we made such a balls up in the first 2 days. We didn't even look at the results the first day, and the second day I sort of had a cursory glance as I left. And then we strung together a really good set of results and stayed calm. And, you know, our anticipation for that event was we'd have been super happy in the top 10. You know, we're getting on a bit now, been around a while. And we're up against you lot, and you're all young and fit and fast. And to finish second was like, there's no one more surprised than us. But to steal second off of Stevie and Rory on the last day, we were really happy about that.
The last introduction possibly doesn't need too much of an introduction because he's been the front of the class for much of the previous seasons, and that's Luke McEwen. So Luke, can you give us your first RS800 Nationals and finishing position, and then your proudest RS800 result?
Yeah, so first Nationals was 2011 in what was then the new Portland Sailing Academy. This was the RS Games. It was Portland's practice for the Olympics. Massive turnout. I think I can't remember how many boats there were, 60-ish. And might have been more than that, might have been 70, and we came 24th, which we were incredibly pleased with. We even it was pretty windy, and we basically just got completely blown away. We couldn't tack when we got to wind mark and difficulties like that. I just remember Stevie and Harvey won the Nationals. Was it Stephen Harvey or Stephen Allen?
I think
Stephen Allen,
wasn't it?
Stephen Allen. They won. I think they won every race, and Stevie came and repaired an enormous hole in the bow of our boat when we tore the bowsprit through it, instead of going out and having a beer and celebrating or focusing on his next day's racing. So I was pretty impressed with the class at that point. So the 24th. So we're very happy with that. And our proudest results, I would say, was probably the first time we won anything, which was the 2013 Open meeting at Leamington. So it was kind of a home turf, and James Tate and Toby Windsor were there. They were the reigning European champions, and I think about to go and win the Nationals, or maybe they had just won the Nationals. And we had a good tussle with them on the first day, which we were pretty chuffed with. And then the second day was one of those days where every race, it was like Groundhog Day, every single race was the same. And we just figured out where to start on the start line. And once you were in the front at the window mark, with the way the tide was going, we couldn't catch you. And we just banged in 3 firsts, and then I had to rush off and catch a plane before the prize giving. I just remember this feeling of elation, like we just got 3 straight bullets and beaten the European champions. Oh my God, I can't believe it. We'd never won anything before in the 800, so I think that was probably the moment of greatest elation.
And always good to win a home event as well. Always adds the extra special to it. Right, I'm not going to do too much talking today, because I've got such a wealth of experience around me. But I just want to say the purpose of this chat really was we had our very first Terrible Boat chat, and it was a bit of an RS 800 boom sheeting love-in. But one of the great things about the class is really the versatility and how you can set up and sail the boat. So we thought who better to get on board than was Andy Jefferies and Luke McEwen, get them talking to some of the young chaps in the class, Rob and Tom, and just have a discussion through about the pros and cons, about the two systems, why they work, how they complement each other, and that's it. Hopefully it gives you a bit more understanding about the other side of the class, and a bit of the history. So I'll mute myself now. You've heard enough from me over the last few weeks of lockdown, so I'll hand over to Rob Gullen to do some of the questioning and talking. I look forward to listening.
Right, so I guess my first question to both of you is, obviously when you first started sailing the H, you didn't have a choice. You had to helm sheet. What was your thought on the change, and was it something you tried at all to switch to the boom sheeting, or did you just stick with what you knew? What were your thoughts on the change period?
Yeah, shall I start?
Yeah.
I was initially anti boom sheeting because, for all the reasons why it had been banned before, I believed the line that the risk to the class was that it would suddenly become dominated by basically big bloke helm crews who could outplay the main, and then to be competitive you'd have to have a big bloke crew, and that would probably rule out, let's say, well, certainly me sailing with my wife who's 5'4" and under 60 kilos. Even though she's fit, there's a limit to how strong people can be. And so when Chris Fibush, who was then the class chairman, decided that it was time to push the class towards allowing boom sheeting, I was pretty nervous about it. So we all kind of got together and thought, how do we make this work? How do we stop it just becoming basically a small 14? And one of the smart things that the committee came up with was limiting the purchase on the main sheet. So you have to have a 3-to-1 at the back of the boom, and that means that there's an awful lot more rope to handle, but it also means that the loads are very light, so any crew pretty much can do the boom sheeting. And that means also that if you've got a big burly bloke, there's only so fast he can pull the main sheet in. So that kind of levels the playing field a bit with the helm sheeters who've only got one hand to do it with.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, isn't it? And I'm assuming that you sail with the 5-to-1 purchase in the middle, do you?
Yeah.
So yeah. You haven't really decided, because there are a couple of guys who sail with 4-to-1 and a split tail in the middle. But
I do that.
Do you? And how do you find the loads with that?
They're
really
pretty
strong?
high. They're pretty high. But then on the other hand, if you're boom sheeting, you kind of got to set the boat up anyway a little bit differently. So I'd rather have less sheet, especially downwind, kicking around, and I can move quite a lot of sheet because obviously point of sailing you do lose out on is two sail reaching for sure, because you've got to be able to move the sheet quick. So the good thing about the 4-to-1 is I can move a lot of sheet quite quickly. A whole armful is quite a lot. So yeah, I've always done that. I've always sailed with a 4-to-1. I don't think there's probably any major difference between 4-to-1 and 5-to-1. It's just the sheet loads are lower, but tend not to play it too much anyway when you're boom sheeting. Well, I don't anyway.
Yeah, you just put it in the cleat, Andy. I've watched you.
Yeah, I know.
I think
put the bang on really hard.
We've talked about this a lot even with the cruise sheeting. It's if you do have the boat set up well, it's actually amazing how little sheet you need to move, isn't it? The rig is quite automatic, and if you're set up badly, it can be a whole world of pain. But
yeah, I think that's one of the things you learn. Well, certainly one of the things we learned when we got into the class was, I don't have much in the way of arm muscles, so that's why we sail with a 5-to-1. And I'd find that my arms are knackered after sailing not very long in sort of breezy weather. But then as you get a little bit more precise with your steering, you realise you don't actually need to play that much. And it's a lot to do with, as you said, the boat setup. So having enough kicker and cunningham on when it's breezy. There's kind of on the class website. There's a sort of 10 or 11 things to do to make the boat controllable when it's breezy that just kind of take the bite out of it. And if you do those things like pulling the dagger board up, moving the jib cars out, moving the jib tack down to flatten the sails, suddenly the boat just becomes an absolute joy to sail, even if it's quite gusty. And then unless you're on a white sail reach, you can easily control it with a little bit of main sheet and some tiller.
the time that I found it really difficult, I mean, I didn't do very much, to be honest, helm sheeting, but the 2-sail reach in a hailing pursuit race in the breeze was the really difficult part.
Yeah, I mean when you go and do like the Glen Charles and stuff, that is the time when it's not great. You're trying to reach across the harbour. That's when you really you can struggle. On a windward leeward, it's not so bad. Maybe sometimes down to the spacer mark, if it's in the corridor of death, it can be tricky. But generally speaking, it's okay. I mean, I kind of came to it slightly differently. I came into ISL 14s back in the day when they had jammers. And so I sort of did that, and then I went off skiff sailing and 49er sailing as a crew. So I've been used to boom sheeting, and when I came into the 800, I did it as a sort of club boat. I was doing it sailing with Alison. She owned the boat, and she needed someone to helm for her. So I started sailing with her. On the weekends, I wasn't sailing 18s. So it was kind of different going back to it, but it was no option. I mean, Ali's, she was like 53 kilos or something, and it was full on. Sailing off of Eastbourne, pulling the kite up and down, and then it would have been, that's the only way we could do it back then. So we just got used to doing it, and we just found ways of doing it. When you sail with someone really light, and you've got to be pretty smooth in the boat. You've got to actually sail the boat in a slightly different way to when you sail with a guy, because if you throw the kite over the side, they just pull it back out of the water. You've got to be a bit more thoughtful when you sail. When
she's your wife, Andy,
with a girl, and then when she becomes your wife, then you've got to be really careful, because all sorts of things can go wrong if you have a huge argument on the water. so it kind of became, I think probably both myself and Luke, it's kind of a necessity. What's great is that I was, like Luke, worried that it would cause the class to change, but actually hasn't caused it to change at all. It's just different. And it actually brings more people into the class, because it means it's more interesting for two guys to sail together. Divvies up things. So
I don't think anyone could have hoped for it to be any more successful than it has been.
No,
it's actually fulfilled all of the positive points of it. With actually there's been barely any introduction of negative points of, as you say.
I totally agree with that. I mean, like you and Francis, I mean, if as you sail the way round you do, it's perfect for you. You can do the main sheet. It's great for her. But if you swap round, you might change the mode. But I don't think you change your speed.
Yeah, and I think the the beauty of the main not being completely fully battened just has that, it just allows, that bit more give in the system, which I think benefits or takes away from the crew sheeting element, and it's just that bit more forgiving. So it allows, there's just a bit more freedom in the system than you would get with, say, a 49er main or a 14 main.
Yeah.
That I think just negates the benefit of the crew being able to sheet.
The thing, and we talked about the boom bend a little bit before, didn't we, Tom? We can't decide if that's a factor or not, really. But we reckon with the crew sheeting, because you're really pulling down at the very outboard end of the boom, you just don't have as much give in the boom. An 800 boom bends a lot when you pull the kicker on, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I did an interesting thing a couple of years ago. I put the boat on its side. No, we loaded the boat right up. Like we sail when it's fully windy. Pulling on the Cunningham till the top battens. Just inverted completely.
Yeah.
And all the rest of it. And then we measured with the luge gauge all the loads on the various parts of the boat, and the kicker had, the main load-bearing rope on the kicker had 38 on a luge gauge. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Wow, so it's like, well, depending on the rope thickness, that's 200 odd kilos.
Yeah. So it's, you are pulling the vang. You're definitely vang sheeting pretty hard to make it work.
Yeah, and I guess you're pulling it as hard as you can with one hand, aren't you? And it's, what is it, 16-1 or something? Is that right?
Yeah, and I moved my main sheet takeoff forward by 6 inches, so I'm pulling down. I'm not pulling at all. Where you look at the actual eyes, they push the boom forward. I don't do that, so everything's on the vang.
Yeah, that used to be a big thing in the 470, getting that main sheet takeoff, so it was doing absolutely no bending either way to the mast. Yeah,
then when it's it's all bent and it's all on, it's raked up. You're quite a long way off the centre line, and then it's pretty automatic after that. Then it's all about the slot.
Yeah, and obviously you were fast in Garda, and I mean, you strung in a load of seconds in a row, didn't you, in quite breezy conditions?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, we know that place pretty well. I mean, we've been, I don't know how many times we've been, 6 times, and we've never been out of the top 6. Yeah. So, we've practiced there a lot as well. So we kind of know it quite well, and it's all about, getting a groove and getting the nose down and going.
Actually, that was something you spoke quite a lot. I mean, we probably got you after you'd been in the bar league, but you were talking about the low mode that you developed for Garda. Do you want to let us into the secrets there?
Yeah, of course. What the secret is.
Go on to, please.
Yeah, because so in Garda, just for everyone who wasn't there, so Tom Partington and Francis won, and they sailed the kind of, they would do the starboard end start, sail a bit on starboard, tack, sail the slightly higher mode with the fleet kind of through their jib window, and then tack on the ley line inside the fleet generally, and that seemed to work well for them. And Luke, you weren't sailing with Emma for Garda, were you?
No, unfortunately Emma had injured her finger, so she was out of action. So I was sailing with Millie Boyle, who's a very good crew. She just won the 420 Nationals 2 weeks previously. 420 Worlds. But she'd never been in an asymmetric boat before the Saturday when we got there. So there was a steep learning curve for her. But in terms of where we went up the beat, that wasn't always the best direction. But going back to your question about the low mode.
Yeah, so Luke would consistently tack off the boat pretty much and sail this really low fast mode, which sometimes put some incredible amounts of distance on the rest of the fleet. It was something to behold.
It was a bit of a funny position to be racing in Garda, because we were not quite in the normal kind of reaver slot along the cliffs. So it seemed if you got to the cliffs too early, you kind of got a little bit sucked down in a header. I haven't seen that before when we've raced on previous occasions.
You were pretty bow forward though. I would be sitting there watching, or laying there watching you, and you'd slowly come out in front of our jib. So on all those boats that are that close in, we're doing that. There was just an acceleration up that shore,
Yeah.
It was a slight header.
Yeah, you
but
get
it was
you
a
get the
big
more breeze
acceleration.
there, but yeah.
It
So-
could have been like 7-8 knots more breeze over there.
Yeah.
I
So-
guess coming back to the question is, and obviously you made some adjustments to allow yourself to sail that free, fast mode. And actually, that's something that's generally harder to do as a helm sheet. You imagine when you're sailing the low, fast mode, you would need to move more sheet, but actually you were doing it very successfully.
I think at Garda, it's because you're in much, considering the amount of wind, you're in pretty flat water, and there's very little gusts normally. So it's. I mean, I've watched. We learned from Andy actually, funnily enough, first time we went to Garda, following upwind, and basically Andy's just lying there with his main sheet in the cleat, and just doing a little teeny bit of steering in the gusts, and going like an absolute rocket ship with just gallons of kicker on. I can believe the 38 on the loose gauge, and so we tried to sort of learn from that really. But to my mind, it's about just this might sound a bit stupid, but powering the boat up. Stevie, I think, described it as leaning on the jib. So I think what he means by that is basically set the boat up to be pointing a bit higher and then just bear away. And then as the boat accelerates, kind of the apparent wind comes forward and then it accelerates a bit more. And you don't actually need to adjust anything, you just end up going faster. You maybe ease the main out a little bit, but the boat just goes faster and faster. Somewhere like Garda, where the goal is to get to the cliff, because it's that much breezier, and you can be 2-3 boat lengths further to Leeward, 4 boat lengths maybe by the time you get there, but as soon as you hit that breeze, suddenly you're 5-6 boat lengths further forward and I can cross easily.
And you mentioned this earlier, actually, talking about setup and the 12 things that make the boat easier to sail. And Tom sent us a bit of video of you sailing to watch. So it doesn't look particularly windy, but I did notice your board is quite a long way up in it. Is that something you get into quite early?
We do. That was something that we discovered quite early on by accident when someone said, pull the board up. It's not necessarily faster, but it just makes the boat so much easier to handle. So, my first bit of advice to anyone joining the class, as soon as you start to feel like it's getting a little bit hairy, you pull the board up. And when I say up, I mean 15-20 centimeters up.
Yeah, I mean, it looks in the video like it must be. Or you're single wiring downwind.
Yeah, that's.
Time. So let's say it's 10,
so in those,
10 to 11 knots
not,
kind of thing.
Yeah, in those conditions you want board down. We probably had it up because we've got a board that we use in Lymington, which is a little bit less pristine than the race board. So that's just for practice. But yeah, generally you can be not slow anywhere from about 16-17 knots upwards with the board up. You might be a little bit lower, but you're faster. Upwind, downwind, I'm sure it's an advantage to have it up a bit, but not enough to make it worth putting it up when you go around the wind with Mark.
I've got 2 theories on that why that works. I think there's 2 things that are going on there. I think firstly, I don't know how many of you sailed windsurfers back in the day, but windsurfers, when it got windy, they used to rail up if you had too much board down. And I think Steve Irish said to me way back when I first started, you've always got to be in control of the boat. The boat, you've got to own the boat rather than the other way around. I think lifting the board, when you hit a gust, it stops the boat screwing up into the wind. And so when you're sheeting through the cleat and you can't move the sheet quick, you kind of need to have the boat pretty neutral so it doesn't rail up into the wind and heel over and seem to go upwind. I think that's one thing. So it makes the boat feel quite soft. I think the other thing that happens is as you pull the Vang and the Cunningham on, you're moving the centre of the centre of effort of the sail backwards behind the centre of lateral resistance which share between the board and the rudder. So by lifting the board, you're taking some of the ballast off the board and you're putting it back between the two. You're moving that back to get it underneath, and again you can feel that on the helm. So before, like Garda's a good case where you're going to sail into an increasing breeze, but we'll always do an upwind there. And we're trying to get the boat to feel neutral and the helm to not have any weather helm in it at all, but not lee helm either. But we're just trying to get the boat to feel balanced. Once it feels balanced, you don't have to play the main sheet anymore.
And to be honest, that is from a technical perspective and forces, if something's balanced, it's going to be a lot easier, and it will ultimately be quicker.
Yeah.
I think that.
Well, and then there's another thing at Garda, because it's a drag race basically to the right hand, cliff, and the case last year it was pretty much to the ley line. There's a few things important there. You've got to get yourself a transit for the windward mark. You've got to line up 2 trees or something so that you know when to tack. And then you know that's the ley line, so you're looking for your transit rather than looking at the windward mark over your shoulder. And so when we're sailing there, once you've got the boat set up smooth, the only other way you're going to go faster is to get more righting moment. And the only way you can get more righting moment, and I don't know if you've done this on the scales, is one for a start you've got to trapeze low. That's obvious, but also you can actually use your arms. So when we're on the port, if we're typically Garda would try and port start if we can. Even if you duck a load of boats, it doesn't matter. You just got to get out on the lane. But as soon as we're going in a straight line, Ali will have both her arms behind her head. And if it's super smooth wind, I'll get one arm out as well. And that makes a big difference.
I was playing with a main sheet above my head with.
Yeah, I remember looking over my shoulder, seeing you
with
both arms over your head.
Both arms, just trying to get extra righting moments so we can shoot.
It's super important in one design.
I think it's a good edge, isn't it, for the helm sheeting boats in particular. That upwind, your crew can be very eyes out the boat, which is nice for them, but also they can just get both those arms out all the time, ideally.
Yeah, Ali gets the guns over her shoulder, and that's it. We're off.
Well, that's a good point about what the crew does upwind. So if your crew sheeting, not that we've done it that much, we did a little trial to try and get the boat set up right for the rules when it was brought in that you could do the boom sheeting. And I mean, one noticeable thing was that Emma was having to focus, perhaps not that much practiced on it yet, but she was having to focus a lot on sheeting the main and looking after balance. Whereas normally she's completely, other than trimming the jib a little bit, she's focusing on where we're going on the race course, and I just steer. That's my job.
It's really different, isn't it? I don't know if you found when you were doing the helming and not main, so crew sheeting, and this is something I tried to teach myself a little bit over the winter, but my background's largely keel boat, so when I'm driving a keel boat, I'm really locked into the in the boat stuff. Like, you're just looking at heel, you're looking at the jib, you're occasionally looking at main kind of thing. But actually, when you're helming and the crew's doing the main, you have to teach yourself to be looking where the apparent wind's coming from effectively. And laser sailors always talk about they sail the boat, but they're never looking in the boat. They're always looking out to the course. And training yourself to do that as a helm is quite difficult, especially if you come from kind of more conventional boats where the helm is often the speed person and the crew is the eyes out of the boat, big picture tactics person. And I guess when you're doing the helm sheeting, your crew can do that more traditional role of eyes out of the boat, big picture tactics role.
Yeah. So that I guess that's one of the things that helps level the playing field, because then we've got kind of Emma's brain on upwind tactics, which is a lot sharper than mine.
I think another thing Ali does that helps when you are helm sheeting, you do need to play the main sheet early. You need to be a bit proactive. So she calls the gusts as well. So that helps.
Yeah.
Because when I do have to play the main sheet, it's pretty good if I know there's a gust coming. It sort of gets you ready.
Yeah, that's really useful for sure. And conversely, I guess, and how does it work with you and Frances, Tom? Presumably Frances is talking about what's coming down the course to you, is she?
Yeah,
or is it kind of a two-way?
Typically I'm more focused on boat speed. That's and I stay well out of tactics. I just keep my head down.
Wise.
And basically that's my role is other boats, and keeping the boat going, because when we first started sailing, we found that we were fighting each other quite a lot. Frances was trying to steer and I was trying to play the main, but we've kind of settled on a role where basically Frances will do as minimal steering as possible, and then I do all the trim with the main. to keep the boat going, and therefore less. Then basically we know that it's my role, so I'll keep an eye on what breeze is coming towards us. And if it's a big gust or you can see a big knockdown coming, I'll communicate it. But typically, small communications or changes in pressure we don't really talk about.
And I guess you don't need to be looking at the main to be easing the main in the gust as it's hitting. You're better off looking at the gust coming, aren't you?
And to be honest, I won't look at the main at all. I'll kind of know, I'll have marks where I'll pull the kicker to, and I'll put it to there. And then, to be honest, I won't really look at it again.
So if you need, so would Francis then say, "Can I have a little bit more Cunningham?" And then you would just pull it, or would you just do that by how the boat feels in terms of you high, slow, low, fast?
Yeah, pretty much on feel. I think we didn't discover lifting the board up until probably halfway through Garda, so we were sailing with the board all the way down the whole time. I think there's a little bit from in the 14 we pull, because we've got a massively long sense board, we put it up all the time. But in the FX, Francis never really pulled the board up very much, so we took that approach of keeping the board down. And actually then we weren't pulling as much controls as I think we needed to. We're having lots of issues of controlling the main backwinding. So Garda was a bit of an eye-opener. By the second half of the week, we kind of worked out, actually, this is how we should be sailing it in this much breeze, and the amount of controls. But to be honest, controls for the main, I will do myself, and Francis will mainly look out and do big picture tactics, because that's where her strength is kind of visualising the race course and kind of seeing how things are going to unfold.
Yeah, so kind of either way, whether you've got helm or crew doing your tactics, or helm or crew being your speed person, successful teams kind of divvy out those roles.
And I think we do
split them amongst you rather than it being a...
Yeah, and just working on what each of our strengths are. Typically from my sailing, it's all been around long race courses, and actually boat speed is a lot of the time the key. If you haven't got boat speed, you're going to struggle. So that's where I kind of focus on that bit in the settings and getting the boat set up. And Francis will be on, starting tactics, and that's how we divvy up our strengths, basically.
All right. So coming back to the video of Luke and Emma sailing, it's actually really interesting because we've spent quite a lot of time over the winter doing our crew sheeting stuff, and also watching Tom's videos on YouTube. And the way we sail the boat through manoeuvres to the way Luke sails the boat through manoeuvres is very different. And actually, both seem equally effective. But I noticed watching the video, Luke, you very much come out of tacks or jibes, and you sit on the rack.
Yeah, you could say I'm a bit old school that way.
But I mean, it's really smooth, and certainly doesn't affect speed.
Well, the basic
probably helps
problem
you
with
rack 10, doesn't it?
Rack 10's useful.
I was just about to say that.
But the basic problem with helm sheeting is that you've got three things to hold on to, and most of us have only got two arms. So you can try and be really clever, and there's some good video. There used to be on YouTube of I think it was Dave Hyvey practicing in Weymouth, in Portland Harbour with nice flat water. He does these beautiful, essentially wire-to-wire tacks with helm sheeting. But there comes a moment as you come out of the tack or the jibe where you're trying to hook on, and you're trying to get the boat going after the manoeuvre, and the crew's relying on you to have just the right amount of power on to balance their weight going out, because they're going to be quicker out, so they're committing themselves to jumping over the side. And you can, about 9 times out of 10, if you're really slick, you can get it right. But 1 time out of 10, you get it wrong, and you do a really bad tack, or worse, to be capsized. So I've come to the conclusion that you're much better off just saying, okay, we'll come out of this manoeuvre. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to get everything organised. I'm going to get the boat going. I've got my crew out on the wire, which is most of the writing moment because I'm sat up on the side anyway. And then in my own time, I'll hook on and go out. And it is for sure it's slightly slower than if you watch Tom and Guy on their nice videos. Tom, they're both out on the wire pretty quick after a tack or a jibe. You got in the power on earlier, so that is undoubtedly faster. But if you're going to say, well, I'm doing the helm sheeting, I think the pragmatic approach is not to try and be a hero and do three things at once with two arms, but just to take it steady, get yourself organised, and then you'll make a better manoeuvre most of the time.
And I think when you're holding the main sheet, whatever you do, even if you do go out on the wire, you have to be hooked on before you go out as the helm who's playing the main.
Yeah.
Whereas Tom, when he's holding the jib sheet, often does the exit where he just goes out on the handle and then he'll hook up with his tiller hand, which is just not an option when you're holding the main sheet at all, is it?
No. And you don't know, there's a gust coming or there's a lull coming, and you've got to be able to respond to it.
And how about you, Andy? Do you do a similar thing, or are you?
We're kind of. I think the key to all of this is consistency. Whatever you do, you've got to do it every time. We kind of have a routine. We'll be sailing along, and when we go, we'll say we're going to tack, so we get ready to tack, and we both actually pull ourselves up a little bit because we're normally pretty low. So we pull ourselves up, and the main reason there is that both of us actually hook on before we go out. Ali does it and sort of like takes out the slack with her other hand, and she fires herself over like a ninja. That's like as soon as we're through the other wind, she just goes, and that's good because it powers the jib. You have to, obviously you can't shoot an 800 main in quick. It's the hardest thing to learn on an 800 when you first get in it. You cannot shoot the main in until the boat's moving, otherwise it just screws back up into the wind.
Yeah, you just get stuck head to wind, don't you?
Especially
terrible.
if you've got tons of hang on. So we pull up, we go in on the handles, we go through. Ali goes straight over the side. I hook on and sort of throw myself over the side eventually. But if you pulled up to the right height each time, it means the trapeze is loaded, and you don't do that sort of leap of faith where you just like drop your butt over the side and hope. I don't
hope the ring doesn't miss the hook.
Yeah. So we're kind of like, we're probably not that fast at tacking, but we're just trying to stay super consistent, and that's really the key to it. I don't think it actually really matters how you do it. I don't think you're going to win a race on a fast tack, but you certainly lose a race, or you certainly lose out from that leading group if you do a bad first tack.
And of course, it's good discipline doing that raise on the wire before every tack. That's sure. We'll know when you're tacking on the race course, Andy.
Sorry.
We'll know when you're about to tack on the race course.
Well, yeah. Well, if anyone who's raced against us quite a lot knows that, I'm sure. But it's like, it's one of those things that where it really counts isn't that first pressure tack if you're in the lead. You've got to have your routine, or you get into the windward mark and you're coming in on say port, and you're going to come in underneath the first couple of boats and you've got to tack. At that point when the full adrenaline's on, you've got to be able to be really consistent and just like do your routine. That's where I think you see the teams who sail together a lot have an advantage in the high pressure moments where you've got to just be on it.